Alright, this is my 4th ground lesson for private pilot. I didn't end up uploading the navigation systems and radar procedures. I felt like I need a little bit more work on that and more reviewing before I put a lesson out, just because I felt like the whole time I was kind of trying to figure things out as I was teaching it. So it definitely helped me to learn some things and just brief on some of the things that I used to know, but I just didn't want to upload it. But aeromedical factors, I definitely have got this down. This was one of my worst subjects on my knowledge test for private pilot, so I had to really study this. But aeromedical factors, that's what we're going to get into today. To start off, we're just going to go over medical certificates. Basically, medical certificate, obtaining one should be one of the first things you do when you decide that you are going to pursue flight school. How you can get one, I would just talk to your instructor and ask them how to go about it. But if you don't have someone you can talk to about it and you want to go get it, you can go on FAA.gov and then search for the AME, which stands for Aeromedical Examiner. Schedule an appointment, go to their office in person. They're just going to assess your physical health. You're going to do a urine sample, and then they're going to approve you to be for a medical, and then they're going to sign off on it. As a student pilot, technically you only need to get a 3rd class medical. There's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class. Technically you only need to get a 3rd class, but I just went ahead and got a 1st class, and basically they only last so long. So if you're under 40 years old, which if you're under 40, there's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class. If you were to get a 1st class medical and you're under 40 years old, that 1st class lasts for 1 year. And then it bumps down to a 2nd class for your next year, and it's 2nd class for 1 year. And then for the last 3 years that you have it, it'll be a 3rd class. So you have it for 5 years total. If you just went and got a 2nd class medical, you would have it for 1 year. And then you'd have your 3rd class medical for 4 years, and you still have it 5 years total. If you just went in and got a 3rd class, you would have that 3rd class for 5 years, and it's 5 years total. So no matter which one you get, you're going to have it for 5 years total before it expires, but it's just going to bump down a class each year. Now there's different privileges with each of these. Student pilots, you just need a 3rd class. You can go into further depth about what each of these allows you to do. As a commercial pilot, you need at least a 2nd class, whatever, but that's all that I'm going to say about that. If you are over 40, it looks a little bit different. So you still have 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class, but your medicals are only valid for 2 years. So you only get 2 years total on your medical before you have to go get a new one. The reason for this is pretty self-explanatory. As you get older, you have more health issues, and your health could change quicker. As a young person under 40, your health is not going to change that rapidly. So you get 5 years, but you need to go back in for medical every 2 years if you're over 40. And basically, if you went in and got a 1st class, you would have it for 6 months. Then it would bump down to a 2nd class for 6 months. And then you'd have a 3rd class for 1 year total, and that would equal 2 years of having it. If you just went in to get your 2nd class medical, you'd have it for 6 months, and then you'd have your 3rd class for a year and a half. And then if you just got a 3rd class, you would just have it for 2 years total, and that's it. Now, if you feel like you have a medical condition or something that's going to cause you to not be able to get a medical or just cause issues, talk to your instructor and maybe have them call the AME before you go in and discuss those and discuss those things with them and ask just kind of what that means, because it's really hard to get a medical after you've already been denied one. So you really don't want to go in and get denied one. There's also, you can get a special issuance medical, and you can get a SOTA, which is statement of demonstrated ability. But our main goal is to go in and get, whether it's first, second, or third class, go in knowing that you're healthy and there's going to be no issues, get the medical certificate, and just fly with first, second, or third class. Okay, now really quickly, we're going to dive into what we as the pilots need to do to ensure that we are safe. So yes, you can get issued a medical certificate and it says that you are healthy and you are safe to fly, but that's for a very long period of time, and they examined you on just one day. Each day that we go flying, it's up to us to decide whether or not that we are feeling okay to fly on that specific day. So we have a couple checklists that we use, which the first one is PAVE. So this is what you're going to run through before you step foot in the plane to make sure that you are safe. And first, what you're going to want to check is the pilot, yourself. You're going to want to check the aircraft to make sure the aircraft is fine to fly. V stands for environment. It's that V right there. Just meaning the weather conditions, all of that, with where you're going to be landing at, whether that airport is open for service, make sure the runways, you are able to land on them, they're long enough, whatever. And then we have external pressures, which means, you know, if you're flying passengers, they can be putting pressure on you for you to get them somewhere on time. If you're trying to get a flight done before the sun sets and you're leaving late, you can have pressure to, you know, try to fly quicker or cut some things out of your checklist, whatever. And there's some acronyms that go off of each of these that then we run through each of those checklists. So for the pilot, we have I'm safe, aircraft, environment, and external pressures. They also have their own checklist that you go through, but since we're just talking about the pilot and our health, we're just going to go over this I'm safe. But I'm safe stands for illness. So that's pretty self-explanatory. If you have an illness, if you're sick, don't go fly. It's going to impair your abilities and your judgment and coordination, reaction time, like all of that, because anything that we're feeling on the ground is most likely going to be heightened when we climb in altitude. So keep that in mind. Then we have M, which is medication. So if you don't know whether or not you're able to take it, contact your AME. So say you're having, you have allergies and you want to take allergy medicine before you go fly. Contact your AME before and ask them if it's safe for you to use that medication and then go fly. You can go on the FAA website and they have a list of medications that are safe to fly with or aren't safe to fly with. Or if you're sick enough to the point where you can't handle it without taking medication, maybe that's a sign that you just shouldn't go fly. Then S is for stress. So if you have other things in your life that are causing you stress, like relationships or whatever, don't go fly. You're going to be distracted. A is for alcohol, which was going to go over this later, but I'm just going to go over it right now because it's pretty easy. Don't fly under the influence, obviously. 8 hours bottle to throttle. So you shouldn't be drinking less than 8 hours before you fly. Honestly, I think that's very low, and I would never fly after I'd been drinking just 8 hours prior. If you have an 8 a.m. flight, that means you could be up till midnight drinking and still go fly. Obviously, you can't fly hungover, and you can't fly if your blood alcohol constant, I don't know what it stands for, but BAC, it can't be greater than 0.04. So obviously if you're staying up till midnight, if you're drinking heavily, you probably can't take that flight at 8 a.m. If you're just having one drink at midnight, you could technically still go fly. Still think that's kind of pushing your luck. And honestly, I think this should be 0. I don't think it should have to be less than 0.04. I think it should just have to be 0. But yeah. In F, we have fatigue. So pilots technically should have 8 hours of sleep and 10 hours of rest before a flight. So you're sleeping for 8, but you should also have 2 hours where you're not studying, you're not whatever, you're just chilling. And then down here we have emotions. Again, just if you're feeling sad, if you're angry, if you're whatever, don't go fly. And then another one that I didn't learn at first, but my DPE told me that I could add in is eating. And so basically if you're flying somewhere to go eat, if you're flying somewhere to go get lunch with someone, certain foods can impact, the way you feel and stuff like that. So if you go and you get a huge greasy burger and fries and a milkshake and you're so full, all that type of food, it's not really good for you. It's going to make you feel tired and fatigued. And if you have a long flight home, it can make you feel tired on the way home. If you're flying somewhere and there's seafood on the menu, raw seafood, maybe don't get that because it could upset your stomach. There could be something wrong with the food and then you get sick on the way home and you're the one that has to fly. So now we're going to dive into hypoxia. So there's 4 types of hypoxia. We have, the way I was taught it was A, B, C, D. So D stands for drugs and alcohol, which would be our histotoxic. I just think of it as that's toxic, has the word toxic in it, and drugs and alcohol are obviously toxic to our body. And then we have the B stands for blood, which is our hypemic. I always remember this because you can be anemic, and anemic is something's wrong with your blood. And then we have altitude, which is our hypoxic, and that's our most common type that we're going to be prone to getting, just because as we climb in altitude, we're prone to getting hypoxic if we don't have supplemental oxygen or a pressurized cabin, things like that. So we want to be aware of that. And then our C stands for circulation. I always forget that one, but it's stagnant is our 4th type of hypoxia. So this one, as we climb in altitude, if we don't have supplemental oxygen or pressurized cabin, like I said, then we're going to be susceptible to getting hypoxia. Hypoxia is when the body doesn't have enough oxygen. Hypemic hypoxia can be caused if you already have anemia or some other blood diseases. You can be more susceptible to getting it. Circulation, so stagnant hypoxia, this could happen from pulling too many G's. Drugs and alcohol, or histotoxic, self-explanatory. Drugs and alcohol, drugs and alcohol, toxic to your body, so it's already causing your body harm. Then as we climb in altitude, everything gets heightened, so anything you're feeling gets heightened as you climb in altitude. So it's going to make you feel worse and give you histotoxic. I'm going to write a few notes down. I have a hard time remembering these, but hypoxic, our body so our body just doesn't have enough oxygen as a whole. We're just not receiving enough oxygen. Oh, another type of way you can get hypemic hypoxia, which is the most important one I forgot, is carbon monoxide poisoning. The blood is not able to transport the oxygen. Stagnant, the blood is just not flowing. And histotoxic, these cells can't use. So the cells are getting the oxygen, but our body is just not making use of it. So I just kind of think of it as when a person gets drunk, or like when a person gets too drunk or they're impaired, oftentimes they're stubborn and, you know, they want to keep drinking. They don't want to come down off of their partying, and they don't want water. They don't want help. They just want to keep drinking. And so I kind of think of like our cells as being like stubborn little drunk people. It's like we're giving you everything that you need to get better. Like we're giving you water, we're giving you oxygen, we're giving you food. We're taking away the alcohol, and you still refuse to use what's good for you. That's kind of how I remember it. Supplemental oxygen is when you put the mask on. The pilots wear the mask while they're flying. And there's different types of supplemental oxygen. Basically, there's limitations on how high we can fly without using supplemental oxygen, and at certain altitudes how long we can fly without having oxygen. So once we reach 12,500 feet and we're flying at that altitude, if our flight from point A to point B at 12,500 is 20 minutes, we don't have to use oxygen. So less than 30 minutes, no oxygen. But as soon as our flight hits 30 minutes long, we are required to use oxygen. So if our flight at 12,500 is 30 or longer minutes, we have to use supplemental oxygen, and that is for the crew members. Once we get up to 14,000 feet and above, crew members must use it the entire time. So you must be using supplemental oxygen. Then once we get up to 15,000 feet, it must be offered to passengers. And the reason why it says must be offered is because it's required that we give them the oxygen because they may need it, but we can't force them to use it. And as a crew member, you have other things to focus on. So if you give them the oxygen and they don't want to take it, then that's their fault and that's their problem. So we just let them not use it. These symptoms for hypoxia, so how you know that you're going to be feeling or experiencing hypoxia is you're going to feel euphoria, which is like a feeling, kind of like you're drunk. You're going to have a headache, and you're going to have blue fingernails because your body isn't moving the oxygen through, so your fingernails are going to turn blue. Now we're going to get into hyperventilation, which kind of has the same symptoms as hypoxia. Hyperventilation is when your body doesn't have enough carbon dioxide. Basically, hyperventilation, you guys probably know what that is. You're breathing really fast because something is stressing you out, causing you anxiety, and you're breathing really fast and you're not really able to like control your breathing. Kind of feels like you're like suffocating, but what happens is your body loses all the carbon dioxide, and you need a certain amount of carbon dioxide in your body, because as we know, we breathe oxygen and we breathe carbon dioxide out. So if we're breathing really fast, we're losing all our carbon dioxide. We have sort of the same symptoms as hypoxia. The way to solve this is breathing really slow. Focus on breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. Try to talk to people, talk really slow, and just really focus on your breathing. You can even breathe into a brown paper bag to get that carbon dioxide back in your body. I didn't really explain actually how we can solve hypoxia or how to help it, but if someone in a passenger is experiencing hypoxia, what we're going to want to do is descend immediately, because altitude is one of the main causes of experiencing hypoxia. So we're going to want to descend, get to a lower altitude, and see if that helps. If it's not helping and it's really serious, then we're going to want to land immediately. If the person is experiencing hypoxia and we think maybe it's stagnant hypoxia, which would be from carbon monoxide poisoning, then we're definitely going to want to land immediately, because that's going to be affecting everybody in the plane. If there's carbon monoxide poisoning, use supplemental oxygen if you have it. Open like fresh air sources, turn off all the heating sources, and land immediately. And what happens with carbon monoxide poisoning, basically, so we have this tank in the front of our plane near the engine and stuff, and inside the tank is the exhaust tank, and basically all the exhaust air is going into this tank, and I'm not really sure what it looks like, so don't take my picture too seriously, but I'm just trying to get you kind of a visual. So this is all the exhaust air is moving in here. This tank is around it has air in it, and this exhaust air is so hot that this gets really hot and heats up the air that's all around it in that tank. Then from there is where is something that connects to our cabin heat. So when we pull the cabin heat in the cockpit, it's going to be pulling air straight from this tank that's heated up from the exhaust air into the cabin. If there happens to be like a little crack in our exhaust and air is leaking out of the exhaust into this tank, then that means we're pulling exhaust air right into the cockpit, and that's what's going to give us carbon monoxide poisoning. So that's why we want to turn off all of our heating sources, and then we're opening windows and any fresh air sources so we can get fresh air. And yeah, now we're going to get into middle ear and sinuses. So basically, if you have sinus problems, don't go fly, or if you have a head cold, something like that, because as we climb in altitude, the pain and the pressure is going to get increasingly worse. So basically, in our inner ear, we have what's called a vestibular system. And our vestibular system is what helps us sense motion, and it keeps us balanced. So basically there's fluid in your inner ear, and as you move, the fluid in your ear moves to keep you balanced and help you not get dizzy, because it senses the movement, and then your brain is able to like comprehend the movement and then understand like what you're doing. So if something is blocked in the inner ear and that fluid's no longer moving, or sometimes it could get like, if you move too long in one direction, which, you know, as you're if you do like sit in a chair and you spin a bunch, the fluid in your ear is moving in one direction for so long that whenever you stop moving, it makes you dizzy and like kind of spatially disoriented, because that fluid is not like sending the right message to your brain about the movement that you're feeling. So the vestibular system keeps you balanced, it senses motion, all that stuff. So if our inner ear is blocked, or we have sinus problems or anything like that, it's going to affect all of this, and then we're going to be disoriented and all of that. So basically, don't go fly if you have sinus problems. If you do go fly, or if a passenger goes and flies with sinus problems and you're climbing up, basically the descent, if you keep climbing, it's not going to hurt them that bad, but the descent is what's going to be really painful. If you climb up and then someone says like their sinuses or their ears are hurting really bad, like it's blocked, and or like here, you know, those areas, you don't want to descend immediately. I know you're like, most of the time with Aeromedical Factors, if someone's experiencing something, like our first reaction is to descend and get to the ground and like land and get them help, but you want to stay at altitude. So stop climbing, stay at altitude. Have them try to help it, so swallowing water, doing the Valsalva maneuver, which is where you pinch your nose and close your mouth and you breathe out, trying to get air to release the pressure and the blockage in your ears. Other little things that you can do, but try to help it first and then slowly descend and get them to the ground. Or if it ends up being solved, then you can continue your flight. If it's very serious, sometimes it can lead to bleeding and stuff. So you'll want to try to get them to help themselves, but also descend very slowly to get them to the ground and get them help. If you fly with inner ear problems or any of that sinus problems, you could get spatially disoriented, like I said. So I'm not going to get too much into the illusions just because I feel like it would take me a while to explain them all, and I'm trying to get this lesson done fairly quick. But here's another acronym that will help us remember the illusions that when we're flying. So when you get spatially disoriented, you could experience these illusions. And so what they stand for is inversion illusion, Coriolis effect, elevator illusion, false horizon, Valines, graveyard, spiral, autokinesis, and somatographic. And I would watch a video where it can kind of show you the illusions also in the video, but definitely learn what all these mean and what they look like. That way you can kind of be aware of them. Dehydration, pretty self-explanatory. You know how you feel when you get dehydrated. You have a headache, you feel like sluggish and slow, you're tired, all of that. So make sure you're drinking plenty of water, especially in the summer, especially if you're flying in very hot places. Like I just flew, it's early June, I just flew in South Carolina, near the mountains, keep in mind, which if you're near the mountains, usually it's a little bit cooler. And it was 90 degrees at 6 p.m. and it was so hot during our flight. Like I was dripping in sweat, and that was in South Carolina in early June near the mountains at 6 p.m. So if you're flying in Florida at 12 or 2, make sure you're drinking your water. Make sure you have snacks in your bag. Make sure you always have water in your bag, especially if you're going on a long flight. Things that do dehydrate us is caffeine, and alcohol. So don't drink too much coffee, energy drinks. Don't fly the next day if you drank the night before. Drink lots of water, of course. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory for dehydration. Now we're going to get into excess nitrogen, which never thought that I'd be learning about scuba diving in flight school, but basically what happens is if you say you're on vacation and you guys plan to go scuba diving and you're flying like a really small plane back because you're on like a really small island. So you're flying from the small island to the main island, and then you're getting on your airliner to go home. Well, say the small plane is climbing up to a pretty decent altitude and it's not a pressurized cabin. If you go scuba diving the day before, you're going way down in altitude, and then you're going to climb up the next day in altitude and fly in a plane. That's going to be a lot on your body, and what's going to happen is you're going to lose nitrogen when you go on the flight. So so if you're going on a dive where you're not having to, I forget what it's called, a decompression dive, where you're having to go down a little bit and then time, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but if you're having to do one of those dives and you're going super, super deep, then you have to wait at least 24 hours before you can fly. So I think it's called a decompression dive, but I'm not totally sure on that's the actual name of it. If you're not having to do that and you're just going a little bit down, I don't know the exact like depths and altitudes and all that of it, but you have to wait 12 hours before you can fly. So something just keep in mind when you do if you do it and you're losing nitrogen, you're gonna get what's called the bends, and you're gonna have lots of like joint pain. And basically what would happen is the pilot would have to take you, land immediately, probably near a hospital, and you'd have to go to a decompression chamber. So you'd have to get in the chamber, and it would help you with the bends and all of that. So that is probably the one that I know the least about, just because I feel like we don't run into that too often in the mountains of North Carolina, but definitely you should know it. Okay, and then one more thing that I forgot to go over about alcohol. Your passengers cannot be intoxicated. As the pilot, you should be able to tell if a passenger is getting on your plane and they're super intoxicated. You're not allowed to fly them. They could cause issues on the plane, distractions, and you just don't want that environment around you. So that's another responsibility you have as a pilot. Not only do you have to be safe with alcohol, but make sure your passengers are okay. So that is it for aeromedical factors. There's a few things that I touched on that you could go further into depth about, and I think I mentioned those, so watch videos on those. And yeah, so today's Monday. I'm gonna try to upload this. I take my FOI knowledge test on Friday, so not sure how many videos I'm gonna get up this week. I'll probably do one Wednesday, and maybe one Friday after my test, but probably not a whole bunch of videos this week. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on Wednesday for the next lesson.